Wage is appearing on more placards these days, and it's no wonder. A minimum wage was part of the ruling ANC's election manifesto earlier in the year, and trade union COSATU has made it clear that it intends holding the party to this promise. The minimum wage has been the subject of a long-running contentious issue in economics. The one side of the debate says employers simply react to higher costs by employing fewer people. Thus, a minimum wage makes the lowest paid and lowest skilled worker more vulnerable. Now, the other side of the debate says it is possible to up the wage of the lowest paid worker without compromising job prospects. COSATU says the national minimum wage is long overdue to redress apartheid's cheap labour structure. South Africa, it says, continues to experience excessive levels of income inequality and working poverty. The trade union has put forward 4,500 rand as a wage floor. The South African median wage is 3,033 rand per month. COSATU's Neil Coleman says the Latin American experience suggests it can work.
Like in Brazil, what they did was they massively extended credit and lending to a Brazilian industry, including small business. And then with the demand, the demand boost from workers whose real income was improving, that led to a massive explosion of economic activity. And President Lula said to our executive, he put it in beautifully simple terms, he said, when we put income into the hands of the poor and workers, he said the giant wheels of the Brazilian economy started turning.
And it appears he finds some support in recent local research. UCT's Professor Harun Borat, in his recently published research, analysed international employment and wage data from 30 to 40 countries. He then extrapolated the methods, also considering Stats SA's biannual labour force survey. He found no significant job losses except in agriculture, where more than 250,000 workers lost their jobs between 2002 and 2007.
In every single other sector outside of agriculture, there was no negative impact on employment. And that led us to believe that the case of agriculture was very particular and very specific, and almost an aberration in terms of the impact of minimum wages. And we argue in our research that one of the reasons, or one of the many reasons, is that agriculture is distinctly different and was facing a different set of variables, if you like, relative to the other sectors. So agriculture is a sector where land reform matters, where the relationship possibly between employers and government is more fractious than in other sectors.
Economists argue there's plenty of evidence that suggests exactly the opposite.
I think if you look at the type of stuff that we've seen now in the platinum industry, it's quite clear on the first data set that we got after the strike that there's been a reduction in employment levels. A lot of the contractors have lost their jobs already, and the mines are mechanizing.
The national minimum wage will fall under the spotlight at today's Labour Indaba, called for recently by Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. The Deputy President said in September a national minimum wage will become a reality, providing modalities are addressed. The Free Market Foundation's Themba Nolotshungu says it's a recipe for economic disaster.
For heaven's sake, we've just lost our number one place on the African continent of being the biggest economy on the continent. And now we are second. Now, and we're looking at a situation where we have many people who potentially could be part of the wealth creation process, and we're closing the door on them.
Themba Nolotshungu points to examples of domestic workers like Sibusisiwe Khoza, who hops on a train and a taxi from Soweto to get to work in Johannesburg South.
I'm paying rent for 600 rand rent. Then I buy a ticket for 140 for a train. Then I'm supposed to budget 400 rand for my taxi to come at work. So I'm using 540 rand for my transport a monthly. Then I'm supposed to buy food for my kids.
She earns above the minimum wage set for the sector, but if many like her are laid off by employers who simply cannot afford a minimum wage, the domino effect on dependents or service providers they support will be painful.
You raise the income of the lowest paid, and the highest paid gradually moderate their wages and they come down, and you change the wage structure. What they found in Sweden was that jobs migrated from the lowest paid sectors to higher paid sectors, and there was a process of economic restructuring. That happens in all economies. So there will be a process of adaptation and change, and that's precisely where we're saying that, we're not suggesting that there must be the introduction of measures which are so drastic that they create a massive shock to the economy, which the economy can't cope with. It obviously has to be implemented. It has to be implemented in a managed sort of a way.
Business Unity South Africa is a significant stakeholder at today's Indaba. BUSA's Vanessa Patla says current sectoral determinations are already working. She says the international experience on a minimum wage in countries like Brazil can't be extrapolated to South Africa.
Even with the Brazilian model, it is also supported by other social wages, like your social grant system, other social security benefits. So it has to be looked comprehensively and not just as a single intervention. So I think, hence I said, there has to be a very thorough engagement on this matter so that whatever comes out as a policy at the end of the day, it doesn't really, result in unintended consequences of job losses.
Assume that we do not have negative employment effects, and that's the case for South Africa outside of agriculture. Under those conditions, a minimum wage will reduce household poverty. And that's the exciting and the positive welfare effect of a national minimum wage, right? Is that if we get the level right and we ensure we don't have disemployment effects, it can be used as an instrument for poverty alleviation.
The government has hosted various consultative sessions across the country this year. But ultimately, anything decisive will depend on how this discussion unfolds at the multi-stakeholder forum of NEDLAC. Analysts have pointed out to NEDLAC's unconvincing performance in settling contentious labour and economic issues and say it might be long before any agreement on minimum wage modalities is reached. Devan Murugan, SABC News, Johannesburg.